Trust really is the most important thing in running a summer camp. But how do we do very specific things to build that with families? Hello, Camp Mavericks, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast. My name is Travis Allison. I am a summer camp marketing and strategy consultant, and I help camps translate what they do so that more families insist on sending their kids to summer camp.
And my name is Gabrielle Rail. I'm one of the camp directors at Camp Oro. Camp Oro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities.
My name is Joe Richards, and I'm the executive director at Pierce Williams Summer Camp and Retreat Facility in southwestern Ontario. We're part of the United Church of Camping's, United Church of Canada's camping network across Canada.
I'm Rachel, and I'm the Outdoor Experiences team lead for Girl Guides of Canada, building partnerships between Girl Guides and other organizations to help our youth get outdoors.
And Rachel is co-host of the Go Camp Pro Beyond Camp podcast. So Rachel, we're grateful to have you back.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for being here. So we wanted to think today about trust. I've been watching the news. We're recording this in the first week of January 2021. And I think that it is hard for people to trust organizations, lots of different things. And I think camps can get painted with that brush. And so I wanted to spend some time thinking about how we can be super intentional about building trust. I find after now more than a decade of conversations that with parents that, and really frankly with camps, is that camps just want to say, we do good things, so you should just send your kids here. And that used to work. There was a time in my career that worked. It's like, we run a good camp and kids would just show up. But that is no longer the case. We need to be intentional about it. We need to be thoughtful about it. And there are lots of points where we can improve the ability of us to build trust with families and be intentional about those things. So I thought what I'd do is just for fun, start with things that camps do that reduce trust or destroy trust in families. So I was wondering if there is some specific things that you're thinking of. I'll buy you all a couple of seconds to think about it. The thing that I see, well, first of all, is just saying you should trust us and not being willing to put in the work, and not understanding that that sending kids to camp involves a huge transfer of trust, that we have to invest in that relationship. And so once kids are signed up, the camps don't communicate with those families until 2 weeks before the kid comes to camp. That there's like, we're going to just take your money and we're going to disappear. And that there's not going to be any communication. We sent you a registration package. It has your whole parent booklet, and we assume that you're going to have time to read and understand all this. Just show up happy on the first day. And that to me is one of the things that can destroy trust. We've trusted you enough to send your kids, but then you kind of just abandon them once you get their money. Certainly that's how it feels from the parent's perspective. I expect that that's not what the intention is behind that for camps, but I know from talking to parents that that is the case. And so, Rachel, I wonder for you what the sort of things that you think of, that you see that could reduce or even destroy trust between parents and camps.
Yeah, I think when camps use language that is second nature to them, so, magical moments,
So good.
things, naming activities that you only understand if you've been at that camp for 20 years or are the third generation to go to that camp, because people don't understand. They think that you're hiding something from them. And I think that that's really challenging, and it automatically makes parents and caregivers feel like they aren't welcome there and aren't part of that community. And you aren't extending any trust to them by doing that. And I think it's really damaging, and it's really easy to do that because that language is just so much of our just like part of our day-to-day, but it's that hidden curriculum again, where we aren't sharing things and being open about it.
Yeah, that's perfect. What comes to mind for you, Joe?
What comes to mind is that trust is a lot like the phrase "I'm the boss," right? If
Sure.
I have to tell you, if I
Yeah.
continually say I'm the boss, then I suck at being a boss, right? And if I just use the phrase "trust us," then I have done nothing to build that trust up, and I'm expecting to get something I'm not giving or haven't shown. I think that there was a news conference yesterday, and there's been a news conference many days during these pandemics. And one of the things is to build trust, right? Is to be, what do we do to break trust? Is we can look at what other people do. They don't show up when they say they're going to show up. They don't do what they say they're going to do. When they say they're going to be a certain time, they're not on time. These are all things. I had this discussion last night around my dinner table with my partner and my two, my 17 and 19-year-old children, right? Like, what is on time? On time is 5 minutes early. And if you're on time, you're late, right? And that's, if I've trained my kids that way, and I can train my camp staff, I think that camps a lot of times break parents' trust by thinking they know what we know, right? And be it the language, as,
like the lingo,
Rachel, like the lingo, or or that you're just like, oh, I'll send this out a month beforehand, and then they'll understand everything about camp. As opposed to in today's day and age, where it's easy to say, great, meet us online, especially now, 3 years into a pandemic, right? But meet us online and let's talk about what your questions are. And if nobody shows up, then that's great. Then those parents don't need your help. But I think that by not going any extra steps is where we would lose the trust of camp parents.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also a mindset. I think we're sometimes in that mindset. Like, do you know how much work I do to prep for your kid?
Sure.
Do you know how much I've, my staff training, the work, and then on top of it, I need to market. On top of it, I need to hold your hand. On top of it, you don't read any of my material, and so it's sort of that mindset. And I think that there is an element of where passion is lost. And I think that when you're trying to convince somebody to do something, that's passion just goes right out the window. But if you can stay connected to what excites you about your camp, but not care if somebody registers,
yes,
that's where it's sort of like the sweet zone that you can stay in. But I think that the trying to convince somebody, or just not being in that mindset of this person is learning this for the first time, and I was thinking about camps, in the past couple of years, and I was thinking about the conferences that we used to go to, all these, and I remember, all of every year there's like a new thing within the camp industry, and we were all up in arms about it. And I was thinking about bread companies and how I wonder what bread, like, I'm sure there's conferences for bread, bread developers or whatever. And I was thinking about when gluten-free started to happen, and what was the conversation that was going on at these like, what's happening? And like, we're purists, we gluten all the way. And there's these new young bucks that come in and say, no, we can have this new technology. And it's like, it's taking away from our tradition. Parents don't give a 2 cents about what is going on behind the scenes. They just want us to care about their kids. It's our job to worry about all of those things. But sometimes I think we get, for lack of appreciation or lack of awareness, we can get in our own way when we're communicating. Nobody cares about the bread industry and how they're dealing with the non-gluten crisis. Just make sure there's bread for me and my partner and our kids. And of course, we all eat different breads. Just make sure it's there. I'll buy it. That's it.
Totally. I do want to talk about proactive things. Anything else anybody else has been thinking of that is a trust loser? And I will say this idea, you think it is incredibly hard to get trust and incredibly easy to lose it. And so that level of, I keep saying intentionality, I mean, it's a big theme on all the Go Camp Pro podcasts, but we have to be so intentional with stuff. But
just, I mean, you've said this so many times, Travis, about people not responding to emails or phone calls or whatever. Seriously, just think of it as dating. If you're reaching out to somebody and they don't call you back in 3 days, I've moved on to somebody else. Like, I've swiped. Now I'm regretting swiping right on you. I wish I would have swiped left. It's literally, how are you trying to build a relationship with somebody, and how do you genuinely want to connect with them? And I think sometimes we just completely forget about that. But if you're in the dating world, it's you don't want to be somebody that feels like there's a game that's being played.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So then I like to think about this in lots of different stages. And dating's a great metaphor that we have to think about. What are the things that people need from us, and how can we deliver those in the way that they need, not what we have? And how do we think about this? Because there are, and my big example was once people registered, but there are all these moments before people register. And so for you, Joe, what are the things that you think about where building trust with people who have never met you, don't know your staff, don't know the program? What are the things that you think about?
What I think about recently over the past 5 years is the idea that video is essentially free to you. Unless you grew up in the 80s and 90s and were around at the beginning of the internet, where there were actual video hosting websites that cost thousands of dollars a month to host your videos on. The idea of sharing a video, which gives them a face to a name, and gives them information. What people want to know is how much you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? And so the idea is that they are looking for, oftentimes parents aren't looking for ridiculous amounts of information because we're all overloaded with information. They just want to know that you're competent and that you care, and that and they want to know who. They want to know the who. And I think that's easier.
Such a huge piece.
Yeah, I think it's easier when you've been long-term somewhere. Like, I think there's a definite face, right? I'm 17, 18 years into what I'm doing here at Pierce Williams, and I have a brand new person starting on Monday, right? And so part of that is you're passing on your trust through someone. So by me hiring that person, what you're saying to the community is, you have to trust me. If you've trusted me for 17 years, you have to trust that I've made the right choice here.
To hire,
and also to give that information and put names out. There has to be, with parents, it's you have to give trust as much as you can get it, right? And I often say to my summer staff that I will start by giving you my trust, right? You're not going to earn it. I'm going to give it to you. You can break it. And once you break it, it's going to be one of the hardest things to earn back. And I think that's how trust works, especially when kids are involved, right? You're sending your child to another camp, and there's so many easy ways for us to lose trust in a camp. And as a parent who has sent their kids to other camps, this came up last night
with mixed
results. With mixed results, with no camps being named.
Yeah.
Right. There are camps that we would never send our kids to or recommend that any of our staff go to.
Sure.
Right. Because of what we deem here at Pierce Williams simple things, right? Like tracking who is on your site, right? Like who signing kids out, signing kids in, just all the simple things. One of the things with parents is you want to give them, and I'd be interested in your perspective on this, Travis, as someone who's seen lots of camps, is this idea of how do you immediately make them feel like they should trust you when they arrive with their child for drop-off, right?
Sure.
And at Pierce Williams, we have a very specific method, which involves a lot of people, a lot of hand waving. And before you get to the parking lot, you've already been greeted by like 5 different people to all help you on your way. And part of that is this trick that you want the parents to trust you, but I also want the parents to trust me so that they leave as fast as humanly possible.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a point that I've heard in a lot of discussions with parents. I think for sure I've said this, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but as an industry, we're great at pumping up our staff. Like, yes, they're young. Yes, they're inexperienced. We give them excellent training. They're such great people. They're incredibly responsible. And sometimes the hole that leaves is parents have directly asked me, okay, but who's the adult in charge? like, I don't know who the director is. I don't know who the owner is. I don't know who the person who's going to be, looking after, like, who's the year-round person? Who is the one who pulls all this together? Great. I'm glad that you've trained 17-year-olds to be this amazing person that I just met, but I don't know who the adult church is. So that's an important part. Philosophically, Rachel, what are things that you would encourage camp pros to be thinking about when building trust?
I think making sure, again, it comes down to communication. Are you communicating what you know, what's second nature to you, in a way that other people can understand? Coming from a large organization, there's like some inherent trust there already because people know our brand, but they don't necessarily know what the new program is that we're launching or the new camp that we're doing. And so I like to send my materials to somebody who has no idea what I'm talking about, some friend that I've roped in, and say, what does this say to you? Like, what are you taking from this? Would you
That's
send
so
your
smart.
kid here?
I love it.
Because I'm really good at having inside thoughts that don't become outside thoughts. So I think I've shared something really clearly with the world and nobody has any idea what's going on. So that is a way for me to sort of like double check that. And I think it's really helpful, especially if you can send it to somebody who isn't in camping, who doesn't know all the lingo, doesn't know what to look for, but it's like, oh yeah, I'd like to know where I'm going to eat today. And if that's missing from your website, that's a huge flag right there. But it's something that like we just think is second nature, so we can skip over that.
Yeah. I have a document. Reach out to me and Travis at gocamp.pro if you want a copy of this. It's called the Parent Pathway, and it's from all of these discussions with parents, like, what do parents need to know in order? And it goes down to things like, where are the bathrooms? What's the bed look like that my child's going to be sleeping in? What is, and camp websites, often my first impressions when I meet with camps is, we have very little fun, splashy toys, but I don't know, how kids get to the bed and stuff. So I think that that's really smart, Rachel, thinking about the holes and asking someone from the outside to look. It's the same as, I think, we can get blind to what our site looks like in the summer when we're in the thick of things, is that it often takes a head shake to say, okay, we have to really look at this like we're brand new. And I've done that before. Have a friend who's coming to camp for the first time, just saying, be brutally honest with me. What do things look like? What's the first impressions? And that's how we built a fence around our dumpsters, which was the first thing that you saw when you came in.
Exactly.
It's like,
they're always there. They're always the first things you see when you go into a camp.
I know.
Yeah.
What do you think, Gab? What are the things you were I was thinking about?
For me, it comes down to like three things, like creating connection and care. How are my families feeling cared for, and how I'm connecting with them? And each family falls under different categories. First year families need different information than fourth year families. And we can't assume, first, we don't want to bombard fourth year families with first year information, and we can't put on so much information onto first year. So understanding that there's how people absorb things, there's a limit to it. And secondly, it's looking at what are the main issues that you encounter? What are your patterns every single year that you have with your families, before camp, during camp, and post camp, and try to answer those questions with that connection, care, vision. So before camp, obviously there's certain information that is missed, but basically what it means is maybe you need to break down your information in bite sizes and have it placed in many different areas. During the summer, it can be parent anxiety. So do you have phone calls that you promise that you're going to make within the first 72 hours of first year campers? Do we, have a lot of communication during the summer with families and with parents? Do you give campers not forced right home opportunities, but just free postcards throughout the summer, and they're fun and flashy, and you put a stamp on it for them and you put the address for them, but they get to communicate with home? After camp, campers are not great at explaining their experiences. So do you have something like a memory book that they get to fill out every other day, so that it's filled out for when they get home? Parents will find it in the luggage. Is there a letter that's written to the family 2 months later, right around registration time? So those ideas that we've come up with all come from issues that we encountered. And instead of sort of trying to ignore them or get frustrated with them, those are the nuggets that are trying to tell you there's opportunity for connection here. There's a want for connection here. How can we problem solve that? And how can we approach it with care?
I think in terms of planning, communicating, and listening, which is a lot of what you're describing, Gab, that we can and should do separate surveys or separate feedback loops for first-year families versus fourth-year families, first years versus second years, really. And one of the questions I always encourage my camps to include in their first-year family surveys is, what didn't you know when you arrived, when your child arrived at camp, that you wish you knew? You know, sometimes
Love
it's,
that.
you know, bring a raincoat and an umbrella. I don't know, you know, bring more pairs of socks than the number of days that your child's going to be at camp. And sometimes it's, you know, show up at, if you're here right at 2:30, you can get in and out really quickly, versus if you come at 3:30, it's going to be at least an hour and a half or 2 hours to get you through camp and get heading back home. Whatever those are, I'm just making that up. But
I think about the idea of when I went on my first cruise a few years ago on a cruise ship, which I haven't gone on recently because there's a pandemic, but they put on your bed every night a cruise compass. And when you arrive in your room, there's something called a cruise compass. And what it is it's a sheet of paper that has everything that's going on, what time things are open, what time dining rooms are open, what the shows are. And for adults, it's every day. They give you a different cruise compass every day. I saved the last ones and scanned them into our system, because the same idea for parents, you essentially want to give them something before they arrive that tells them exactly what's going to happen when they arrive, right? Here's when things happen. Here's how things happen. We've talked about it with our campers as well, because our people like to plan. And I watched my daughter when she was 11 and 13 going on cruises, get the kids cruise compass, which goes over the full 7 days, and like circle every little thing that she wants to do, right? And always, and I think that too little information is the problem, and too much information when we expect them to remember all of it is the other problem, right? Just because you think about it doesn't mean they're going to think about it. They're only going to pull the things out that they deem important. And if you have 200 families and only 10 families get back to you with with a question, then that I take that as 190 families don't need the other information, right? They've got it solved. And then they arrive and they obviously didn't read what I sent them. But at that point, it is what it is. As long as you show up with your kid, what you read beforehand is, we'll see when we unpack your kids, when your kid gets, did they bring an umbrella? Did they bring those things?
we can, and Gab said it, we can be better. I think that's the trust building piece of it, is taking sending your kid to camp is complicated. It is so much more complicated than so many other things for kids programming. And because of that, we can break it down. We can put it in pieces. We can repeat the important parts. So we can change up the media with which we deliver the important parts. All of those things, are an important piece of that. Rachel?
I think it also builds trust when you let parents know that you're looking out for them. So like we like to send home a sheet, like print this and put it on your fridge of all the important dates that you're going to need between now and camp, because it lets the parents know that you're looking out for them, that that it's stressful trying to send your kid to camp. So here's the main points that you're going to need. And I think that is great trust building as well.
And I love that, Rachel, because something that myself and my team think about, we keep circling back to, is how do we make parents feel like we've thought of everything, and try to get into that mindset. So, and put yourself in that spot where they're like, oh, they came up with this, I could print this out. Oh, this camp has thought of everything. And, it kind of gets you excited to do that type of work. And now I'm going to borrow this idea from you because it's going to make me look like we've thought of everything. And they're not going to use all of these tools, but when they stumble into that tool or they stumble into that information, the fact that they might have that little light bulb that goes off, wow, they've really thought this through. You're building trust right there, because it's extending to other parts that they know they haven't seen. But in their head, they're like, wow, they've thought this. What else have they thought about? So I love that idea.
Well, in Camp Robin Hood many years ago, I sat through a staffing session, and they had something called a staff expectation sheet, which they had all their pre-staff before the interview read and sign that they've read. And we created here at Pierce Williams a very similar sheet. And that's essentially, yeah, create a camper's expectation sheet so that it goes over the dates, the expectations of campers, all of the, yes, and yes.
I think it's also important to know with the tools that not one tool is going to build trust with every single parent. You need to have a variety. It's like if you go to a restaurant, in the days where you could do that, there's probably half of us are going to look online for the menu ahead of time, and knowing that it's there and accurate is going to be like, yes, like I'm for sure going to go to this restaurant again. Half the group isn't going to care. But not having it there loses trust of half the people who are going to that restaurant. So I think having a variety of tools that people can use based on their needs is important.
And I never even thought that you should look at a menu before you go to a restaurant. And I'm guessing, Rachel, you sometimes do, which makes me think we could be good friends.
There you go.
I think there are so many opportunities. Really, what so many of what you're just describing is starting with the Careers and Beyond in this discussion is that there are places to look who are great examples of this. If anybody who's anytime a camp friend has gone to Disney, pre-registered with a family for Disney, they have ranted about how thoughtful and intentional and, thinking of all of the things it is when you have a trip. And there's so much we can learn from that. One of the things that Joe and I have done with Heather on our Fundraising at Camp podcast is take in fundraising letters. And we did a whole show on just reading fundraising letters and talk about ways to rework it. There isn't a great way to do that within camp. And if anybody wants to send us in your registration letter, we'd be happy to look at it and give advice on a show. Probably a lot of people won't take us up on that, but think about places that you can look for where are customer service things that I can start to build the mindset that I am looking for every opportunity to surprise and delight customers. So I'm taking in, I don't know, if you register for a food delivery service with the recipes, all of those places I'm looking, how can I apply those things so you begin to develop the critical way of thinking that you look for those chances, you look for those opportunities to make parents go, oh, wow, they thought of everything. Because anytime we look sloppy as camps are, a small reduction in trust from parents. So, I don't know, things that are mailed that are, improperly, the kid's name spelt wrong, to, the maintenance yard being open and they can see all the mess in the maintenance yard as they drive in. All of those things are places that have been problems that I've seen.
I think that the idea that it's everything. Trust is about everything. It's about what your website looks like. It's about what you send people. It's about when they drive in. Do they see the dumpster? We built at Pierce Williams, and nobody's seen it because we built it in the fall of 2019. We built a 85-foot long wall fence. We call it the wall. And all it's doing is hiding the back of our barn from anybody who drives into our site. And so when you drive in, you just see a fence, and we have numbers up there because we were hoping our program director would, right? You can do registration. There's numbers 1 through 13. You can do whatever. They're nice, colorful. Nobody's used them yet because we haven't run any programs, but it's this idea that when someone comes on to a site or into if you're renting a school for your day camp program, the signage, the way things look, all of that is about trust. If I have to go looking for where I'm dropping my kid off at camp, that's a bit of a red flag. But everything, it's in everything we do. It's in what our own, and this is a challenge, it's in what our own personal stuff is out there online. Because if they look you up as a camp director, what are they going to find in your own personal? The two things are very difficult to separate.
Philosophically, I'd love to encourage everybody to develop the mindset that I talked about before. I hope you're teaching your staff that you are always teaching. And so whether or not you're teaching people how to be better camp parents with intention, you are also maybe teaching people, oh, this camp didn't bother to think of this little thing. Then you've taught them something about you as a camp, or, you know, this camp staff, we're trying to teach camp staff the same thing, because kids are always watching them, but families are always watching us. So I think those are some, I don't know, it's probably too simple, but it is a philosophy that I think is helpful. If you can just remember that you can build trust by teaching, you can maintain it by teaching, and you can make their lives easier by teaching them as well. Anybody have a final thought or idea on building, keeping trust? Gab?
Yeah, I would say, one, do a brain dump of all of the things that come to your mind, and then just categorize it. What can you get done within the next week? What can you get done in this year? And start to prioritize. There'll always be ideas of things that you can do, but what stops us is the mountain of things that we can do. So just categorizing, brain dump, and then categorize, and then bring a friend in for that conversation, as Rachel mentioned, which is brilliant, is to have somebody outside from the camp community to help say, this is what would be helpful for me. And I think secondly is to not ignore the two-way connection that's important with trust. Families that have been with us for a number of years, them helping us also creates trust. It creates language for them to share the intentionality that we do behind the scenes. And even you can do that two-way street with first-year families by asking them, was this a helpful conversation? Was there anything else that would have been nice for you to see on the website or in an email that would be nice? Is there something online on our social media feeds that you think your child would appreciate from us? Asking them also creates that two-way street. So you don't always have to be giving. You can also ask them, and then them connecting to us, of course, builds a stronger highway of trust.
Disney was mentioned earlier, and sort of building on what Gabz was saying. When we were talking about our first year families, we used to do a training called "What time is the 3 o'clock parade?" And I think that's like one of the most commonly asked questions at Disney. But when parents come to us, really thinking about what's behind the question, like, are we saying like, what's the menu? Or are we saying like, are you going to be able to provide food for my child who can be a little bit picky about what they're eating, and things like that. So really delving into the why behind the actual question that's being presented, and then also sharing that with our staff as well. I think that's a really great lesson for our staff to learn. So when a parent shows up and says, hey, where's the washroom? Yes, they want to know where the washroom is, but they would also love for you to have signage that they don't have to ask that question next time.
It's a great place for us to leave that off. So thank you to the three of you for sharing some great ideas. And so I want to take a moment before we move on to just thank UltraCamp for sponsoring the CampHacker podcast. If you are a CampHacker listener, you can go to ultracampmanagement.com/CampHacker and download their free guide, The Marketing Toolbox. It's designed specifically for camp pros to give you some great ideas and put up for you for UltraCamp. Because UltraCamp feels that, and UltraCamp understands really, that we spend so much time in the office, it can feel like we don't get to do the things that make all of this worth it, that we're just laboring under all of the things that keep us pinned into an office. And so they know that, and they want to make sure that they can simplify your office life. They've created the software to help camp professionals like yourself handle camp registration quickly and efficiently. They are super open and transparent and flexible about the budget and the pricing for UltraCamp, so you can rest easy and then focus on the important things, your campers, your staff. There is a low price minimum entry, it's clear pricing with no hidden costs, flexible payment terms, and no long-term contracts when you get involved with UltraCamp. UltraCamp's goal is to provide resources so that their clients can spend more time in camp doing what they do best. If this doesn't sound like your registration software, don't you think it should? Visit their website, ultracampmanagement.com/CampHacker, and set up a time to chat. They look forward to meeting you. So that means we are on to our tool of the week. And Joe is bobbing his head with his Tool of the Week song. I want to thank you all for being here and showing up with the Tool of the Week. I'm going to start with Gab. What is your tool this week?
My tool this week is vegan snacks for everyone. So I like to keep snacks in my cabin so that if I'm having meeting with staff members, I can just like throw out a couple of snacks and like, here you go. And I was getting stumped a little bit with for vegan snacks. And I don't necessarily always like to do separate snacks, though I think that's nice. But I've been a vegetarian for a very long time, and I've eaten my share of stuffed peppers at every function possible. And so a little variety is nice. So in our show notes, there's a link that links to a whole bunch of different vegan snacks. But just off the top of my head, Twizzlers are vegan, Sour Patch Kids are vegan, Swedish Fish are vegan. Oreos are vegan. So Skittles are also vegan. These are all things that you might not know are vegan. So
Stuffed peppers are vegan.
Stuffed pepper. I don't even talk about stuffed peppers, Joe. It's not a snack. Nerds, you nerd, are vegans. So there's a bunch of snacks out there that you could stock your cabin or maybe in your car if you're a day camp for that everybody could enjoy, including our vegan friends.
Excellent and smart. Thanks, Gabz. Joe, what's your tool?
My tool this week is a product called 100 Conversations Toolbox. Now, this is, you can buy it. I had forgotten I'd ordered this, and it was stuck in purgatory in Michigan while our border was closed for 2 years. So essentially, you could make your own, but it's also nice sometimes to buy things. And essentially, it's just conversation starters. So I did take out some of the racier ones so that I can. And so, like, is there anyone that you regret losing touch with?
Oh,
right. Yeah. So you have some heavy duty ones that you can talk to. And I'm going to actually use it because I've done a new hire, and I have a new hire starting next week. And I'm going to use it to really focus our energy over the next month on getting to know the personal side of my new hire, and allow the conversation to be. Some of them are easy questions. This is a product. There's a link I did buy it on Amazon.com. There's a link to a great UK journal shop that I put in the show notes that will also get you lost in a different world of other stuff as well. But 100 Conversations Conversation Toolkit. 100 Questions Conversation Toolkit.
That's great.
Tools for a more fulfilling life.
That reminds me of it has been a tool of the week before. I think it's called 36 Questions to Fall in Love To. And it is for conversations with someone that you're developing a new relationship, not necessarily a partner relationship, but someone that, and they, sort of get a little deeper. So I love that, Joe. That's really fun.
Yeah. And just one last note, you can also, it has different categories. And so I took out the sex cards last night. I was like, loving a relationship and sex cards. I was like, not with it. You got to know your audience. Always got to know your audience.
We respect your ability to filter, Joe. Rachel.
Mine is my monthly coffee subscription from Muskoka Roastery. I'm always caffeinated, and it tastes like summer camp.
And the coffee's fresh. Gee, the beans are fresh.
Yep, shows up on your door right when you're about to run out every month.
Yeah, that is so good. I have 2 tools of the week, which is whatever, just 2 things, but Rachel's made me pick the one that I wasn't going to talk about yet. I have I've talked about this before. We use Wise cameras around our house, just as security cameras, and they can give you an alert. And I've recommended them for camps, because you can set a little area. You can face one at the driveway. It'll basically take a picture of every license plate that comes in. And if you have a remote site and you're not there all the time, sometimes that can be nice. So I use those Wise cameras. But there is a free app called Tiny Camera that works for Android. That means right above my sight line here, I can see our 2 cameras. So we got a delivery of coffee during this present during our recording. And I saw the person come up. I was able to hit the mute button so you didn't hear the doorbell or the dog lose your mind.
Oh, wow.
But it just, I can see it in, it's on an old cell phone that's plugged in all the time. I turn it off when I leave the office, I turn it on. But that might be something that people would find useful. The other thing is a really specific thing. It's called the Ulanzi Cute Light. It is an LED spotlight that is 1.5 inches cubed, and it will go on full power for 1 hour. And so you may use it for something like creative lighting while you're doing your staff interviews, looking like a pro, being intentional. But you could also use it. One of my favorite things is to do with staff and kids is nighttime painting with light. And so this little light has 3 different power settings on it. I have a snoot. It has magnets on the front. I have a little snoot that can make the light really directional, but I can put color filters on. It's got a diffuser. It could be used for painting with light. It's waterproof, and it's a hard plastic case. There are more expensive ones like Lume Cubes that are in metal cases that could definitely handle the banging around of camp, but for $50, $45 if you watch them on sale, this is the sort of thing that you could use for programs. You could use it for stuff during the year when you're being on camera. You could use it for recording your TikToks. You could use it for painting with light. You could dive with it up to 30 meters, I think. So it's a really fun little light that's super inexpensive, that if every camp had half a dozen that you bought over a few years, sure, you could do lots of really fun programs. I've also seen these kind of lights used attached to drones to take photos. So you have a different light source at night off of the camera. So you might take a picture of your beach at night, and et cetera, et cetera. So that is the Ulanzi Cute Light. We'll have notes in our show notes at camphacker.tv/podcast. So I want to thank the 3 of you for being here. Just to change things up a little bit going forward, I'm going to just put your information in the show notes at camphacker.tv/podcasts. This is episode 160. And so that's how people can reach you, and we'll wrap things up a little more quicker going forward. I want to just do a shout out for another Go Camp Pro podcast. And since we have another Go Camp Pro podcaster on the show, we're going to pick the Beyond Camp podcast that Rachel hosts with Cassie. And Rachel, what are the sort of things that you folks have been thinking about this season that you'd love to draw people's attention to?
Yeah, we're doing some really neat interviews with folks where camp has really impacted their life, and they might be working
awesome.
in something camp adjacent or in a different field altogether, but they are bringing camp into their world. So we interviewed a school social worker who was bringing initiative tasks into the classroom with him.
That's super cool. So if you go onto your podcast app and search for Beyond Camp, you will find the shows from the last few seasons of Beyond Camp. And I really like where the show's going this year. I think it's pretty awesome. It's really fun stuff. And I have an idea for you after the show. So again, go to camphacker.tv/podcast for the show notes. You can reach out to me, Travis at gocamp.pro, with any ideas or feedback. And if you ever want to be on the show or want to pitch an idea, that's the way, Travis at gocamp.pro. Thanks for the evening, friends.